You're listening to Go with Jamarlin Martin. We have a go hard or go home approach as we talk to the leading tech leaders, politicians, and influencers. Let's go. Today we have a special guest, Tony Effik, the SVP of Client Strategy at NBC Universal. He's also a marketing professor at Columbia University. How's it going, Tony?
I'm good, Jamarlin. Always good to see you, brother.
We met at a Digiday programmatic conference in Austin, Texas. Do you remember that?
That was it. I
I
think we've met online first, though. We've been chatting on Twitter and stuff.
A lot has transpired since then. You've made the jump from the ad agency side to working for a company like NBC Universal. Talk about that transition.
Yeah, it's funnily enough, the discipline, the thing I do day to day hasn't changed radically. It's still the same skills I learned over the last 20, 25 years. But I just got a different toolbox right now. Do you see what I'm saying? So basically in an agency, particularly in a creative agency, and I've had different kinds of jobs in creative agencies, the main tool you're playing with is essentially the talent around you. Do you see what I'm saying? So the talent is the creative people around you, the media people around you, the account people, the production people. And what you're trying to do is orchestrate a strategy for a client based on the talent of those people. So you go in, a client has a problem, and you say, okay, well, let's dig into that, and we'll come up with an answer to how to drive sales for you. And you come up with an ad, yeah? The difference with what I do now is that there's a little bit of that in my job today, because we have production and creative facilities, but fundamentally our assets are our TV networks, our film studios, our theme parks, our digital properties. So it's, how do you want to work with the Olympics? How do you want to work with SNL or the Tonight Show or the Today Show? Are you going to do something in the theme park? So we basically right now are thinking a lot about how we activate for clients across the portfolio.
How big is the advertising portfolio within NBCU that you advise on in terms of the strategy there?
Yeah, I'm not going to give specifics, but it's in the billions, many billions of dollars. Yeah, many billions. It's the biggest portfolio in the marketplace.
You're coming from RGA, one of the leading digital advertising agencies with over 300 million of billings at the time you were there.
Yeah, but in comparison, it was like a drop in the ocean in comparison. But it's a very different business model, very, very different business model. The businesses have a very different rhythm. If you're an agency, you're hustling every week. You know what I mean? Because you gotta keep the meter ticking, because you gotta keep clients happy. You gotta keep billable. That's the currency. Is that, are you billable? And so people are filling out timesheets every week trying to say, what did I do last week? Was I useful? Was I not useful? Does a client want this work? Does a client don't want this work? Where we are right now is so different. So right now what we're doing is more of an annual cycle. We need to shift a huge oil tanker, man. I mean, it's like a big company and we're moving bit by bit in a radical transformation, and the business is moving so quickly, and we're moving as quickly as we possibly can. So it's exciting. It's exciting being, in this job at this moment, in this company, at such an important phase in the industry.
For our audience, you're consulting or providing strategy for NBCU to go out there, make more money, bring more advertisers in.
Absolutely. So we are looking at our traditional business. We're famous for our linear TV. But there's so much more, so much more. So my main job is to figure out new ways of packaging up the things we have. So you might buy TV spots from us, but you maybe don't know you could activate in our theme parks. Yeah. You might work with us on Snap or on Vox, which we have investments in.
You have rights to some of the Snapchat and Vox Media inventory?
Yeah. Well, and we have a stake in both of those companies as well as BuzzFeed. And we make shows for those platforms as well. So it's a rich portfolio. And then we're owned by Comcast, which has the set-top box business. And so it's an interesting intersection between different ways brands can go to market, cross-platform, at scale, like really big scale.
So as you know, the digital media industry is one big mess. You have rebate issues at the agency level. Media companies are lacking direction. Some of them thought, social media and, viral publishing was the answer. They got crushed on that. Facebook changes the algorithms. A lot of things change. As you know, a lot of publishers were crushed, those who pursued that path. Then there was this so-called pivot to video. Nobody's making money on a pivot to video and going all in on video. There's no real margins there, at least so far, for most publishers. Where do you see all this stuff going? What's going to be sustainable?
I think you might have a few ideas. I'm pretty sure you've got a few ideas. I think this is a young industry, man. I mean, how long has this been going? I think the industry is still feeling its way around about where all of this is going to end. No one knows where this is all going, really, for sure.
Do you think the innovation and disruption cycles are going to be shorter and shorter, no matter, where the market goes?
Oh, yeah. No, I agree with that for sure, man. It's going to just more disruption, more cycles, even in something as stable as search. I'm reading recently that, there's a stat recently that half of all product searches are now happening on Amazon, not on Google.
Yeah.
Hugely disrupted. Who saw that? I mean, if you look backwards, you can maybe see it coming, but that was a surprise. We were talking about Twitter a second ago. I expected, we talked about Twitter quite a bit. I kept assuming Twitter would keep going through the roof. I'm disappointed at where that company's landing. But with regards to brand safety and some of these issues and fraud and all of that kind of stuff, this was a wild west, man. It was like nobody knew what the guy next to them was doing. Nobody knew who was in between the two of them. Yeah. Nobody knew about any of this stuff. And there was a real rush. I call it was a gold rush. There was a gold rush to and everyone was panning for gold. Everyone's trying to find it. And no one was policing. No one was really, truly checking. And so I feel that, we've come out of that now. No, this is like we've come out of the teenage years and now we're saying, okay, now we're grown up. This industry is grown up. So what are the things we want? And so I think what we've seen is that, and obviously I grew up on the other side of the fence. Now I'm working for a big entertainment company with a lot of TV and video assets. But on the other side of the fence, obviously I was pitching, come to digital. And I had a very distorted view about really the makeup of the business. But one of the things in the big traditional media companies is the fact that they are brand safe. There's regulatory and legislative issues around putting content out there in certain ways, ads out there in certain ways, which doesn't exist in the digital space. So in other words, what we've seen is that the ability for legislation to keep up to date with the industry hasn't been there. And I think it took a long time for Senate and for Congress to catch up. I know you were on that early.
Yeah. Are you seeing any benefit where YouTube will make money on any type of content? There's a lot of brand safety issues there. They will work on Alex Jones, anything.
Yeah, that's not even the worst.
So Google got into some trouble, as you know. A lot of big brands were complaining about why their ads were next to ISIS videos on YouTube. Have you seen any benefit from your perspective in your role at NBC Universal, where although social media advertising is super efficient, great targeting, low prices, low CPMs, but we could be next to InfoWars, we could be next to Proud Boys, alt-right group. We don't know where our ads are being placed. So you're seeing a benefit in terms of how advertisers are thinking now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we saw that this year. We saw that last year. I think a lot of advertisers, big advertisers, and this is in the public domain, have said, look, we felt the pendulum swung too far. Yeah. And then they were starting to say, okay, look, we've got issues with brand safety. We've got issues of verification. We've got issues with viewability. We've got issues with fraud. We've got issues with the overall ecosystem and things like rebates and hidden fees. We also have, and this is the biggest one, we also have issues with effectiveness. Yeah. Is this shit working? Yeah. And we saw a bunch of advertisers move a bunch of money out from that part of the ecosystem, move it towards us. That most famously. And many of those companies didn't really see a huge blip on their performance from what I can see in their numbers.
Are you looking for another great podcast? Check out Get a Grip on Life, a podcast interviewing entrepreneurs, social media influencers, content creators, stand-up comedians, industry insiders, and more. Join host Michael Colligan as he finds out what makes these people tick as everyone tries to get a grip on life. Be sure to visit getagriponlife.com for all other previous episodes, links to social media channels, and more. Or subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search for Get a Grip on Life. Where do you see big value in the digital media industry right now? A segment that is healthy, you could see a lot more investment going through that window of opportunity.
Yeah, I think there's emerging platforms and maturing platforms. So let's do maturing platforms. So video, clearly, we know that everyone does.
Everybody has.
I know, but
what do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is that ultimately we know the power of the moving image. Okay, we know sight, sound, and motion. That's been with us.
About like 3-minute Facebook clips that are like junk.
No, I think.
Are you talking about web series or long form?
I think short form is an established thing out there. I think long form is what I'm excited to see how different platforms play that game and how they're going to play it. I'm interested to see, although Netflix has said they're not going to do it, I'm interested to see if Netflix starts to be ad-supported. I want to see Amazon's trial around its ad-supported Prime version. I want to see more of the OTT players start to expand their platform, and when they start bringing in audience data and scaling around that, I think that whole thing and the intersection of traditional linear is going to be interesting to see where that all evolves. So that's what I mean by a maturing platform. And then from an emerging platform, I'm still bullish on the idea of AR and VR and where that's going to go. We've done a bunch of experiments around that. I'm seeing some interesting things around that platform. That's still like 5, 6, 7, 8 years out before that starts to be what I think it could be. But I think the people have made big bets on video, and the ecosystem has a lot of crap there.
Are you looking for another great podcast? Check out Get a Grip on Life, a podcast interviewing entrepreneurs, social media influencers, content creators, stand-up comedians, industry insiders, and more. Join host Michael Colligan as he finds out what makes these people tick as everyone tries to get a grip on life. Be sure to visit getagriponlife.com for all other previous episodes, links to social media channels, and more. Or subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search for Get a Grip on Life. I don't see a lot of value in digital video right now, and here's why. One is there's a promiscuous amount of players out there that are doing short form video. When I say short form, I'm talking 1 minute to 15-minute videos. Google and Facebook are in that pot, and I'm not just talking about ISIS videos and all that stuff. But as you know, Facebook right now, they're a partner with Jada Pinkett with her show. They're doing custom shows. YouTube is doing, exclusive custom shows. It's just, to me, it seems like there's a glut of inventory out there, and it's really hard to differentiate from an ads perspective. I just think the digital space, it's crowded, and there's no real proof of a good margin, a net on average in the industry today. A lot of people have bet on it, but nobody's really printing decent margins that I'm aware of. I think the value of digital video is going to be some type of subscription in terms of, a Netflix, Hulu. They scaled those platforms, but who's going to scale kind of the new baby Netflixes or the baby Hulus? I think subscriptions are probably the place to bet. Part of this is if, everybody's doing it, it's going to be hard for that to be the right bet. We saw that with BuzzFeed, as you know, with a lot of the viral publishers. Everyone wants to be a viral publisher and everything goes bust. But I think for players looking out, you got to go where the scarcity is in terms of, everybody's going BuzzFeed, everybody's going viral, but nobody was going towards a New York Times subscriptions model where they were building $1 billion subscription business, people paying every month for the content. quietly. They're not making a lot of noise about it. They're just doing the work with a great brand, building $1 billion subscription business of revenue. But everyone, they were talking, hey, you got to be social. No one goes on directly to the platforms anymore. You got to be like BuzzFeed. You got to, try to exploit these social, virality, blah, blah, blah. And then all that stuff crashes. Nobody was going towards the vegetable segment of the market in terms of subscriptions, healthy, sustainable, people paying every month. Everyone's going towards the crack, spending a lot of money on Facebook, gaming, social, YouTube, and all that stuff crashed on a lot of folks who bet on those segments. Now, when you look at the marketplace for subscriptions, you're seeing some examples of success. That's where you're seeing actual cash flow and profits. Do you agree that subscriptions is going to be a bigger thing going forward and a healthier thing for media companies to invest in?
Yeah. No, I'm just trying to process it.
And you're making it good.
No, I was just thinking through, because I think when you asked the question and I talked to it, I think we were looking at it from different angles. So when you asked me the question, I was thinking you were talking about it from an advertiser's point of view. Because I think there's this is a three-legged stool, yeah? So you got the publisher side. Obviously, that's your eye, what I mean? That's where you're always going to look at stuff, generally. Then you got the advertiser side, and then you got the consumer side. I think the consumer's loving it. Loving this, explosion of video, yeah? Because if you look at the stats, every year those numbers go up. Consumers are consuming more and more of it across multiple platforms. That's rising every year. So that's creating demand, okay? From the advertiser side, advertisers are chasing it. They love telling those stories, using their brand stories, using video. So the advertisers check. What they want, though, is some of the guarantees, the peace of mind that you get in television. You know what I mean? Around viewability, brand safety, all that kind of stuff. So when you flip it and you come to the publisher side, I agree with you. It's hard to win that game when so many people are in the game. But do you remember back in the day, in the search engine days, there was a lot of search engines. Remember Excite, AltaVista? Yeah. So that search wasn't a bad business in the end. It's just that you needed a winner to emerge. Yeah. And that happened. So I think we'll see in this space winners emerge. The problem I see right now, though, with the subscription model around video is that, I tell you what, when I get home and I try to flick channels now, I've got my Hulu, I've got my Amazon, I've got my Netflix. I think I might have signed on to a couple of other things, and one for the kids. I've got too many, man. Yeah. And there's just not, and every other week there's a new one. I can't really see that level of
we're gonna have like 6, 7.
No, I can't see that, man. I mean, I struggle to manage what I've got, and every other week there's a new one. I find interesting, but maybe not interesting enough to keep for long. That's my view. So yeah, I'm bullish on subscriptions. I feel that a winner will emerge, but I think video everywhere and anywhere in a cleaner, more pristine environment is going to be big for everybody. And I know that's not...
Are you seeing CPMs going up in terms of brand safe video environments? Are you seeing downward pressure on CPMs on average from an industry perspective?
I think, there's a premium part to the marketplace. Yeah. And so...
Let's say the premium layer of the marketplace. Are CPMs, going up, flat, or down? What are you seeing out there?
I haven't done a study of the whole marketplace, but we're pretty firm in our numbers. You guys we're holding up our numbers.
What about podcasting? The market is about $400 million a year in advertising revenue in the U.S. China is way ahead of the United States at $7 billion a year, where most of the podcast revenue in China is actually subscription based. And I was reading about podcast subscribers in China, and they were interviewing a subscriber to a podcast. And, he's like, hey, if the podcast is helping my life, I love the personality. Why wouldn't I pay $10 a month? Essentially, subscription podcast is blowing up in China. And you have this combination of podcasts kind of, growing at a nice clip globally as a medium. And then you have subscriptions working for more and more publishers. And when you combine those two, I just find that idea very interesting.
I love it. I mean, I was late to the podcasting thing, but now I'm, my morning journey used to be music, Subway, and now it's podcast Subway. Do you see what I'm saying? And then I'm finding more and more moments where I if I'm doing kind of like chores in the kitchen or something like that, I've got a podcast on. Chilling, I've got a podcast on. So, and even now I'm there's certain kids podcasts, there's an NPR one that the kids love. So I'm finding moments for all of this stuff, and I love it. And I think it's just going to keep it. Do you remember years back, I wasn't thinking about podcasts, but I was talking about radio. Remember I kept saying to you, you should buy a radio station? Yeah. And I felt that it was, in my mind, it was that space that was unoccupied. Do you see what I'm saying? Audio. Yeah.
Would you say that one of the reasons, at least based on my checks, the CPMs in the podcasting space are healthy on average? In some cases, $50 to $100 CPMs. Is podcast benefiting from the fact that Google and Facebook, their greedy, monopolistic hands are not in the podcast pot yet in terms of monetization? What are some of the challenges you see with the podcast market scaling? A lot of people I see online are like, I'm launching a podcast. Everyone's launching a podcast. Every week, someone has a new podcast now. Do you see a bubble? Don't bet on this because everybody, the pizza delivery guy, everybody, the guy at the bank has his own or her own podcast. So some people, will see this and say, hey, it looks like there's a bubble. There's a lot of froth in the market. There's too many players rushing into podcasting. And that's kind of a contrarian signal to be cautious. Let's take a step back. Can you bring all that together?
I think the thing about bubbles anyway. So let's say worst case here is a bubble. Let's say it was. It's like you talk about housing bubbles. Yeah. Okay, you talk about stock bubbles, like particularly housing bubbles. The buildings are still left there afterwards. Yeah, there's still buildings after the bubble, and so for me, I think with this, regardless of whether it's a bubble, there is a new behavior out there of people filling their moments and their time with content that they love, that is specific to their needs. Yeah, it's like the more there is, the more choice, the more you're likely to find something that suits exactly you. As long as that need gets established, it's always going to be there. Because someone will want to support and fulfill that. So here's my thing. I don't actually think it's a bubble. I think certainly not a bubble yet from a revenue point of view, because I still feel there's room. Is it a bubble yet from a consumption point of view? I mean, what proportion of the population is regularly consuming podcasts? That's still plenty of room, yeah? Yeah. So
I just see a lot of room for the audience to keep on going over to podcasts, and then also the radio and digital advertising money to move more and more and get more comfortable over on the podcast side.
That's going to balance out, surely. And we're going to start seeing, we already started seeing big networks of podcast publishers.
And you start to see some M&A activity, of course.
And then you're going to start seeing the radio. I mean, like if you take NPR as an example, they're big into podcasts, they're big into radio. So I think you're going to start getting these cross-platform audio-based networks. We're already seeing that. We've got Audibles in the background that isn't going to radio and stuff like that. But you're going to start seeing the intersection of all of this. And then, ain't your favorite subject, but then if you look at Spotify and the play they're doing a video, and then you think about streaming services, Pandora.
Yeah, Spotify, they're doing exclusive deals now. They signed Joe Button. I think it was $1 million number, if I'm correct. Don't hold me to it. You are starting to see Tidal and Spotify wanting to do exclusive podcast stuff. I would say that I'm bullish is because whether you're going through the subscription window with Spotify, and Spotify paying money to the podcast host directly, or Tidal having exclusive podcasts and paying money to the podcast host. Increasingly, you're seeing more premium podcast content put behind a paywall. So whether it's advertising or subscription, I just see a lot of runway in this space.
I think so, man. And it's like, I think the question for me, is it new revenue or are we displacing revenue? You see what I'm saying? So yeah. I think, is it money leaking in from the radio business, or is it people just throwing new digital dollars into the marketplace that weren't there before? So yeah. I think it's going to be a bit of both. And I think at some point the radio networks are going to start saying, okay, guys, what business are we really in?
Yeah.
And how are we going to play that?
Yeah.
And I think, for example, if you think about the moments where radio is really key, particularly mornings, you start saying, well, how do people listen? They're in their car. It's at home. Exactly.
Another theory I have with the podcast business is that it's benefiting because it's hard to arbitrage it. Let me explain. With websites in 2012 and 13, a publisher or a website could create a slideshow. You may spend 3 or 5 cents per click for that user, and the user could generate 7 cents of advertising revenue on the single visit. And so you would take the spread as a profit, and then, you could spend a lot of money doing that. Really, I believe, this aspect of the digital advertising business hurt the market, where a lot of people were using Facebook to ARB, using Google to ARB. But I believe that hurts advertisers. Then you have the nasty players coming in terms of, they're going through the Outbrain, the Rev Content, the Taboola, and other sources, not saying that a lot of these platforms haven't cleaned up their act. As you know, media companies, publishers, websites have played a lot of games with ARB. But anybody could set up a website, and then just plugging Google, you plug in your ad networks, and then you start exploiting the advertising company. And with podcasts, you have inefficiencies with analytics in terms of getting real-time information. It's not easy to really put together a good podcast where someone's going to listen to it, for 30 minutes. You're going to need someone to listen for a certain amount of time. I think the folks can ARB video now. You can ARB web pages, but it's harder with podcasting. I would call it dark money.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, for now.
How would you feel as a buyer? You're at RGA and you're buying banners, and the publisher, doesn't really have the inventory, and they go out and buy traffic for like 1 cent, very cheap clicks, and they get their impressions and they fill your campaign with purchase traffic. Vanity Fair, GQ, they have been caught, at least one of them, buying shady traffic and filling premium advertising campaigns. Newsweek, it was reported the feds came in and raided their office, and allegedly they were caught doing some shady stuff. And the feds, of course, came in to look at this stuff. But if you're a buyer and the website is buying 80% of the traffic to fill the buy, that's not a good deal for you. Would it be so harsh you would sue to get your money back if you found out?
Do you know what? I knew when I was on the buy side that there was a lot of shadiness going on, yeah? So you kind of know that's out there. And even when stuff isn't shady, it could be legit.
Yeah.
But it might not be your audience, but you don't know that. You know what I mean? It's kind of what is known as an asymmetric market, yeah? So one side knows the truth, the other side doesn't know the truth. Okay? So the publisher in that instance knows it's not quite right for you, or it's shady, or something else like that. You just don't know. And then there's millions of publishers. So how on earth do you go making a good decision? It's really hard. Yeah. So you can have as many analytical processes at the front end to try and tidy it up, but fundamentally, you're relying on somebody else's information, whether it be a ComScore or a Nielsen dataset or some other form of certification in your planning tools. Yeah. But in truth, that doesn't weed that out. You can't see that looking at ComScore. So the only way you can really deal with this is that I had a couple of policies in place. you can fool me once, but you can't fool me twice. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm not necessarily just buying the inventory for the sake of buying the inventory. I'm buying the inventory to look at the performance of the inventory. That's my back check.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? So if I think that I'm buying an audience that's going to go and buy product X and product X doesn't sell, then you're not getting another chance. You're off my plan.
Yeah.
Easy to get onto my plan, hard to stay on my plan. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's my first thing. And then the second, which basically means that you got to have really strong analytics in place. And then the second thing is that when you come onto my plan, I'm not going to put all my, the whole wallet down. Do you see what I'm saying? I'm just going to give you a taster, do a test, see how that works. And then I'm gradually then going to build up over time. And I'm going to be comparing you.
Did you ever ask how much of your traffic are you paying for? Did you ever ask, hey, your ComScore says you have 30 million unique visitors, this many page views, but how many of those are you paying for? I know of publishers, they would, look to exploit buyers who would buy off the ComScore numbers. Oh boy, this site has a lot of traffic. But the website owner is just buying the traffic for like 1 cent. It registers in ComScore. And, they can sell high and buy low and complete the art.
There's a level that, if you think about your average day, at least the day I used to have, I had a lot of stuff I was processing. I was on multiple platforms, multiple clients, multiple, devices. So there's a lot of complexity in all of that. So your ability to dive deep on any one company is actually pretty limited. You see what I'm saying? So I can't lift the hood up on all of these companies and do that. That's the first thing. The second thing is, here's the thing. Everybody has audience. And it's like overlapping audience. So it's very rare to find somebody who's got a unique audience that doesn't exist.
Yeah, a flavor of ARB on the buy side where like, hey, I don't want to pay a $50 CPM on ESPN, CPM for the audience, $50 per 1,000 impressions. But I can find that audience somewhere else and pay a lower CPM.
And the other thing is that maybe you do get ESPN and then people land on your website, you've cookied them, and then you're going to get them through retargeting, yeah?
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? You don't hit them that way, and then you're paying single digit CPMs at that point.
So I want to talk about total market versus black media. As you know, a lot of big advertising buyers in the marketplace, they're saying, hey, look, I'm not putting my money in a black budget. I'm not putting my money in a multicultural budget. I'm not sending money to the black agencies because I can get, you guys on a YouTube buy. I can get you on a general market buy. The demographics are changing. Americans are multicultural now. I don't need to separate my budget. I don't need to segment my budget and put it in the slices. That's not efficient for me. As you know, money has moved out of the black buy box and into the total market box. The white buyers are mostly saying, I don't need to send my money to a black agency like Burrell Communications in Chicago. I don't need to send my money to Uniworld, another black ad agency. Do you think brands are making a big mistake in terms of this total market approach?
I think it's a bullshit argument, man. Complete bullshit. Yeah, because think about it. The world isn't moving to broader and broader media. The world is moving towards tighter and tighter audiences, more and more segmentation and targeting, and combinations of the two. So, for example, how many briefs do I see? I want to target millennials. I want to target boomers. I want to target this specific segment, not give me the whole of America. So why, all of a sudden then, when it comes to a black audience, or increasingly a Hispanic audience, because we own Telemundo, the why all of a sudden that doesn't target and doesn't count anymore? And it does count. If it counts for the rest of that, then it counts for this as well. So the issue is that you're gonna hit millennials with the same message you're hitting boomers with, or people post-retirement. No, you're not.
You're not a big fan of total market. You don't think there's a lot of logic in it.
No, I think it's a good business. I think it's a good business. I think there are certain brands who at a certain point don't need to make a distinction in their advertising. And they need to reach the whole of the country. That's great. You have to do that.
Yeah.
But you don't do that and not do other stuff. So, for example, in your whole marketplace, there are going to be certain segments that are just really important to you as well, yeah?
Yeah.
So why don't you heavy up on those audiences? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Particularly if an audience, so for example, if you have certain products that do really well amongst African Americans or Hispanics or whatever, then put a bet on that audience. And don't just put your dollars there. Do custom creative. Talk to them in a language and in a way that feels familiar with them, and then show them, signal to them that you give a damn. Signal to them that you're in their camp. That's the thing that I think people are looking for when you advertise in those titles.
So I talked to a NASDAQ-listed CEO, brother, Alfred Liggins, the CEO of Urban One, and he said, first, they do about $700 million a year in revenue across radio, TV, and digital. But he said Facebook never reached out to them about any type of discussion, partnership on content, marketing, nothing. He said they just never reached out. But what I do know, me being in the market, is they were looking at picking off his sales team. Another, industry insider shared with me that they were developing a push to go take the Burrell and multicultural money. So internally within Facebook, they wanted to go out and get the black money, the Hispanic money too. The mainstream total market pot was just not enough. Obviously, the media business is being crushed in general by the duopoly of Facebook and Google, running over more and more stuff. Do you think they have a responsibility to think about how they could restructure our society on so many different levels? How can they be contributing to, inequality at scale? Where all these black ad agencies, all these black media companies, they don't have, any money. Banks don't want to lend to them. They can't invest. Google and Facebook are going after the little dollars that are left in this kind of black space. Facebook would say is, hey, that's not our business. This is capitalism, baby. The big wallet wins. Do you feel that they have any responsibility? If black media companies were to go bankrupt across the board, major media companies are failing too. But if Facebook says they want the black salespeople from the black media companies, I'm going to offer them a higher check. I'm going to start going to Burrell and tell them that their shit sucks and Facebook is better. I want that money. Do you think they have, any responsibilities as a corporate actor?
I'm going to answer that in two parts. I think, so my answer is yes. But I think a company is always going to be a company. Every guy is looking for the next dollar. We know that. That ain't going to change. It doesn't mind if you are Baidu in China and then there is a province of publishers somewhere. You're going to be looking to take that cake. But here's the catch with that. Okay,
I don't know about that, but go ahead. Not with the China, but go ahead. The overall thought. Go ahead.
Okay, so here's my problem with this, is that I believe in this, and I think this isn't just specific to black media. I think this is specific to almost every walk of life right now. And it's not just a thing in media. I think it's a thing across the digital economy, which is to say this. I feel right now, particularly with the way that the technology is changing our society, that these big digital platforms now need to start behaving and exhibiting different forms of corporate citizenship. Do you see what I'm saying?
State actors.
Exactly. And there's you're getting to a point. Like if you think about Uber and the driving economy, it's like you have a responsibility to those drivers. Yeah. You have a responsibility to society in general for the safety. There's all sorts of stuff. You're impacting the world in ways that you couldn't even see. So when you see it, do something about it.
I would say when you're at the scale of a Google and Facebook, the society can afford to wait and see, what they need, which risk management departments are working. Independent folks too. They need to be paying independent folks to start thinking about what am I doing at this massive scale around the world in terms of how I'm going after my profits, trying to hit next quarter's earnings, all the products that we're creating. How could our products and the way we're going about things at this massive scale, how could it kill people? How could it impact governments and elections? How could it impact the kids of the world. If someone or the people get hacked and someone uses all the data that we're gathering across these areas, what could that mean? What could people do with it? To me, from a regulatory standpoint, you need a possible kind of separate department in the government to look at this stuff within big tech before you have the digital equivalent of a Lehman Brothers collapse, a Bear Stearns collapse, a financial crisis, or a data crisis. And so we need to be, looking ahead and policing these institutions that are just, crazy, fanatically going after money. We're moving fast. We're breaking things. We don't care. We just got to get this money. These people and their sick minds in Silicon Valley specifically, they need to be policed.
And it's only going to get more and more important that we get up ahead of this. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? And you talked about finance a second ago with the Bear Stearns and the Lehmans, yeah? The regulators were always like 5 steps behind you. Yeah. They're always 5 steps behind. Yeah. And it's like, so as we become more dependent on this, as we automate our societies and we become more dependent on these systems, they need to be looking at this, because this is the difference maybe between my point of view and your point of view, is that I don't believe there's a lot of people who are going to self-control themselves in that way organizationally. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like if they see that dollar there, they're going to go and take it. But there's you see what I'm saying?
I think there are degrees. I see, significant delta between the culture of Google and Facebook. I don't think, any platform is, goody-goody. It goes to how the difference between Google and Facebook, it goes to how Facebook was created. And I believe, Zuckerberg is a psychopath. In terms of when you look at how he started Facebook, someone hired him to create a product. He ended up taking the idea. He was a contractor, independent contractor. He took the idea, ended up paying them a lot of money in Facebook stock in terms of a settlement. And then, he cheats his, one of the co-founders, Eduardo Saverin, and he ends up paying him billions of dollars worth of Facebook stock in a legal settlement. So they have him on email and chat trying to shortchange his co-founder in terms of his equity in the company. Eduardo Saverin settled and ended up getting over $1 billion. So early on, you're starting to see funny stuff from this kid, right? And I don't think he has a kind of adequate connectivity, human connectivity. I believe last year or the year before that, he went across America saying that he wants to better understand the country and the people, kind of acknowledging it seems like an extreme detachment. I just don't think he can be, the chief risk officer if Facebook is starting to act like it's more of a government entity in terms of influence.
So I agree with you there. And here's my thing. I think there's room for regulation. There has to be regulation, not just on the nature, because half of these companies is pretty monopolistic right now. Yeah, but between a duopoly. So I feel we need to be looking at that. I think we need to be looking at things like employment. As we not pertaining to the media companies, but just automation in general. So how is the rest of this? How are we going to handle the fact that millions of people will not have a chance to work in the future? How are we going to fund that? What's the government doing about it? I don't see anything happening. Yeah. I also want to better understand, and this is flipping a bit, because I feel if it isn't Facebook, if somebody can come and eat your lunch right now, then it doesn't matter whether it's Facebook or Google. So what I would say to the people who own these black media companies is that, okay, well, what's our game plan? What's your game plan?
No organization.
That's what I'm trying to say. Is that you can't, I'm not saying. I'm just saying. Look. So if you're, are you putting engineers on the table, on the floor? What's your go-to-market? What's your pricing strategy?
You're setting up Tony.
Yes. None of them have talked to me. None of them in the whole time I've been here. Yeah. You know what I mean? It was like, so what I'm saying here is that are they staffing right? okay, how are you? I mean, don't get me wrong. Is that how are you going to hold on to your stuff? And I'm saying, and I know this easy to say, hard to do. But what I'm saying is that if somebody can come and take that, we got to be figuring out how do we, exactly.
Yeah.
And then let me just add to that as well. And I'll just say as well, then it's like, what is the audience? Why is the audience so flaky? Why is the audience, why haven't, these publishers been able to gain true loyalty amongst I think the numbers are good, but if you hold your audience, and I think there's something else going on in the society right now. I'm gonna say I'm new to America, but what I'm saying here is that the publishers like Essence and Ebony back in the day, they had it on lock. No one, if you think about their heyday, they had the audiences on lock, and I think a lot of that was to do with identity. And I'm saying now identity is so much more fluid. I feel some of these publishers haven't moved with the times to hold on to that.
For sure. I would hold black media accountable, broadly speaking, on that front. But it would go back to the reason why a lot of the users are not sticky, right? So Google and Facebook, they have, folks locked in to their big platforms. Obviously, they have big wallets to roll out very interesting products. A lot of the growth is, product and, innovation that's financed by really big wallets out of Silicon Valley. We know that. And so we have seen the audiences going to places where it's going to be efficient to connect in places where I can get really, really good product. I'm just saying that it's a big resource component that determines how sticky your platform is. In terms of David and Goliath, the battle between the David and Goliaths out there in terms of building products. And hey, all the cool kids are already over there.
Yeah. I agree with you. It's a resource issue, but I also think there's also something else that's going on, I think, as well, which is like, you can have a website, a publishing business, and it's only, I've got a cup of water in front of me here, whose only job is to talk about cups of water.
Yeah.
And if you think about your world in a global level, all of a sudden you're talking about scale. Yeah. Do you see what I'm saying? And I feel too much of the publishers here, once they get, I mean, that's not what you did, because you were out in the motherland every other day. You had a global ambition. A lot of I'm from the UK. There's a big black population over there. I was on Bossip from back in the day. I was one of the early. I used to. But I think a lot of these publishers, they get out of jail card is by starting to think globally and not being so narrowcast. And I think a lot of some of these people who haven't traveled, they don't know about the other communities, the diaspora around the world. They don't know about kind of the new middle classes emerging around the world.
Are you saying that from an intellect and content perspective? Are you more, weighting that towards monetization? Because what I would say is, you can travel and do all this stuff, but the monetization overseas is not really there. In a lot of places that you would think, there's a huge opportunity. I can, get website or platform traffic in Nigeria. I can roll out a content platform in India and get traffic. And the monetization infrastructure is pretty low, relatively speaking.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm playing out here is this idea that you're fighting, it's David and Goliath, and you're always going to be David in this domestic market. Yeah. And I'm saying, so I agree with you. Yes, you can get the traffic. I would then say you're like 60% there. You see what I'm saying? Even if you can't, even most big global marketers, most big global publishers, there's a disproportionate amount of their revenues coming from the US, yeah? Disproportionate. That stuff ain't small change. And I'm saying, are these publishers truly taking a global view and aggregating the black international community in all its forms, whether it be Africa, Europe? For sure. Do you see what I'm saying? Even South America, and connecting everybody up together. And I'm saying, I'm interested. I'm seeing that thing, yeah. And I'm just saying, and then you start getting economies of scale, yeah? Because you start saying, okay, well, I can publish. This is what Netflix is doing, yes? And Netflix is making stuff here, repurposing it and pushing it out in Australia, or doing stuff in India and pushing it out. I'm even seeing, even in Nigeria.
Who's connecting the global black community?
That's what I'm saying. And I'm saying,
a while ago.
Yeah. And I'm saying, and I think then you can have one central editorial team, local sales team, some local translation type teams, you know what I mean, who start to think about it in that sense. I think that's waiting to be done, man.
Back to corporate responsibility. Recently in the media, a reputable, highly respected Saudi Arabian journalist who worked at the Washington Post, he was a critic of MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince in Saudi Arabia. He goes to Istanbul to handle something related to, getting married, some paperwork. So he's in the Saudi consulate in Turkey, and the reports from the Turkish officials is that he never came out. He was murdered by the Saudis, and now information is coming out where, a hit team, a 15-member hit team flew into Istanbul to kill him on 2 private jets, 2 PJs. This critic was well known in the United States. Of course, he works for the Washington Post. He's murdered. So MBS, at least from my perspective, he's deeply problematic, ethically in terms of the war, ethically and morally in terms of his war in Yemen, in terms of backing away from being a defender of the Palestinian cause, aligning with Netanyahu. He's doing a lot of stuff where some people are like, hey, what's going on? But Mark Zuckerberg, he's connected to MBS. He took, MBS on a tour around Facebook, around Silicon Valley. Joel Kaplan, who is best friends with now the Supreme Justice Kavanaugh, was seen with MBS. Joel Kaplan is one of the chief legal minds and lobbyists within Facebook. Of course, Jared Kushner is connected to MBS. For a lot of folks, MBS, Saudi Arabia, these people represent, values that are very problematic. Now it looks like they're going around, murdering journalists who are U.S. residents. They already had cracked down on media, of course, out there, but now it looks like they've just gone on and sent the hit squad, a 15-member hit squad, to Turkey. People in Silicon Valley, they're starting to question Google in terms of, what are you doing? Why are we making these products for the government who are playing a part with separating parents from their children? And so now people are waking up to the fact that big tech in Silicon Valley is a political establishment. These guys are in the bed with Justice Kavanaugh in terms of lobbying. Joel Kaplan is the chief lobbyist at Facebook, and they hired him because of his connection with Republicans. Facebook and Google, they've been very effective at lobbying, where there's no regulation. It's not a coincidence that over the past 10 years on the run-up of big tech, that you haven't had really thoughtful regulation on this industry in Silicon Valley. A large part of that is due to the aggressive lobbying and money that's coming out of Silicon Valley. Do you think, and let's say the facts prove that MBS sent a 15-member hit team to kill a journalist who was advocating for more democracy in Saudi Arabia? Do you think the employees at Facebook, for example, should be mad or angry at Zuckerberg for doing business and giggling with the guy like this? Or do you think, hey, this stuff is separate? He's head of state. There's nothing wrong with that. We're not, judging here. Like if you worked at Facebook and let's say this guy sent a hit team to go kill a journalist from the Washington Post and you saw your CEO just giggling and doing business because they want business from the people in Saudi Arabia. It's not like it's just Mark Zuckerberg. MBS is over at Google. He's shaking hands with Jack Dorsey at Twitter. He's in the bed with Silicon Valley. They really bow down to his money and power. They roll out the carpet for him when he comes out there.
So yeah, I mean, here's my view about this. In the 30s and in the 40s, Germany, you have Hitler, you have the Nazi Party, and then there were the parts of corporate America that were very friendly with that administration. Yeah. And you look back at that, and these companies, obviously some of them have hidden some of this history, and they look back at it with shame, yeah? So there isn't anything new about corporate interest and corrupt and amoral governments getting together. So that's nothing new. What I would say that I think is slightly different from your point of view, there's a whole thing about Saudi Arabia and where it's at basically, but which we can dive into a little bit. But I think my general feeling about the Silicon Valley population is that they're more left-leaning. In fact, the right have been the ones complaining about the Googles, the Facebook. And if you think about it, if you remember when the Muslim ban happened, the Google executive team, pretty much Silicon Valley unanimously came out against it. Okay, so, and these people are based in California. These people are pro-immigration, pro-open markets and free markets. This kind of is almost the opposite of kind of what the right-wing establishment feels like right now. So I think they're definitely more left-oriented. So I think what happens though, and this is the same thing with Google, is that you might have that, as it goes back to this whole thing about we're not escaping the human condition. So somebody at some point has to say, am I going to do what I believe in, or am I going to get paid? And I think that's where it comes down to.
The right and left doesn't help. In Facebook's case, I believe that their God is money. And if your God is money, you start taking on a posture where we don't take sides. It doesn't matter if it's Hitler. It doesn't matter if it's MBS. We don't care if it's Jim Jones. If there's $1 to be made, even with blood on it, we're taking that money. We're not looking to be judges of, murder, racism, we're not judging. We just want the money from both sides. And so, there's a hesitancy to pick sides. So if that's your type of mindset, you're going to have a Peter Thiel on the right. You're going to have a Joel Kaplan on the right. You're going to push out Sheryl Sandberg out left. You're going to push out Mark Zuckerberg out left. There's no real kind of consistent political stream or cohesive political point of view from the company. The only thing that's consistent is a fanaticism for greed and power and growth. That's the kind of sick religion that I see.
That's the fundamental, and I think I mentioned the 1930s and 40s, not to say that the Saudi king or whatever is the equivalent of Hitler, but what I'm saying here is that we are, as individuals, however high up or low down we are, in situations every day where we got to make a moral choice about what we believe in, and about are we going to keep true to ourselves, or are we going to try and take the next dollar? And I generally feel, particularly when it comes to stuff that has a consequence on people's lives, life or death, then I'm, if it's about taxation, maybe we can talk about that. But if it's about somebody living or dying, I think I want to stay on the right side of that.
In terms of the potential backlash, if you did work at a Facebook or a Google, would you be protesting with some of these employees that are protesting about some of these issues out there in Silicon Valley?
It's difficult to say if I don't work there and I don't know what the culture is. I'd like to think I would. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. If someone said to me, "Is that something you would do?" I think my answer instinctively is yes. Whether I do it, I don't know, but I'd like to think I would do it. Do you know what I mean? Regardless of what the consequences is, what I mean by that.
Before we close out, I want to talk to you about your teaching at Columbia University. What inspired you to take your real-world experience and want to go out there and teach students?
Do you know what? It wasn't like a selfless act. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It was an act of self-interest. Yeah. And what it is that I liked about it is I have this thing. So, I'm a black guy in the advertising business, always was. Not many of me. And I always felt, and I had this philosophy always of this idea, I call it objective difference. The higher up you get in the industry, the less it is you're able to distinguish between people. And what then starts to happen is that people get better positions based on the relationships. If you don't have those relationships, you're not going to get the better positions. Yeah. Unless you know something that no one else knows. Yeah. And that's why I call objective difference. It was about mastering things that people didn't know. And so I believed about 6 years ago, that data science was going to be like a big thing that differentiated people in this business. And so I started hiring people from Columbia. I started digging into this, working with that department there. Myself started to acquire and internalize a lot of this knowledge. And I actually started to know a lot about it. And I started to know about how all the different things worked, how different algorithms were built. I wasn't an engineer by training, but I knew how to work with them really well. And so I started saying to myself, oh, great, this is really good. How do I consolidate that? How do I signal to the world I know about this stuff? And how do I keep my knowledge fresh? Because what I have to do is every semester I have to sit down and say, okay, what am I going to say that's interesting enough for 30 or 40 master's students in engineering? And I have to reinvent a curriculum each semester. And it forces me to keep at the top of my game. So that's kind of why I did it. And there have been times where I'm like, oh man, it's Monday night, it's late. I don't know if I want to do this, but then I keep going.
When I look at your career, it's obvious you deal with strategy. It reads to me as an observer, your path has been very strategic. Let me explain. My memory is that I was reading articles within the digital media industry, advertising industry, Ad Age, Digiday, and I started to see your name pop up. Your name was a little different. I was like, cool, man. This guy, seems to be from Nigeria. He's a heavyweight in the industry. This is really interesting. So I look you up. I may have read 5 articles where you were quoted. When it came time, where I saw you at a programmatic advertising conference in Austin, my interest in terms of walking up to you was based on your PR profile, kind of you being quoted in the media. When these publications were asking you for quotes, was that something strategic? Were you involved in that, or was it, purely, organic?
Full transparency, you're more pushing it. Yeah. And then sometimes they're pulling.
So I was thinking it was a strategic. Like,
yeah.
I gotta get my name out there.
Oh no, it wasn't necessarily about me getting my name out there. It was more to do with like when you're in an agency environment, the agencies that do well tend to be the agencies that have the highest profile.
Yeah.
And if how do you get a high profile? You have to have an opinion on something. And the journalists are not going to quote you if you haven't got an interesting or different opinion. So agencies, or at least good agencies, do spend quite a bit of time thinking about how they become quotable by putting out interesting stories, having journalists that they work with on specific topics. And so I started to really focus on, machine learning, the digital ecosystem, social media, the power of influence, programmatic, some of these topics that at the time were still kind of like still immature. They were still evolving. So I became a voice in that space, and that was really about really trying to drive the visibility of my team, around the world that I was working on at RGA. So, and the journalists, I mean, you saw stuff, but the amount of stuff you do in order for that little bit to get out, because you can do tons of interviews, they don't all get out there into the public space. So keeping on top of stuff and keeping ahead of the marketplace and having a helicopter view is part of what is necessary. And that goes back to my idea of objective difference, yeah?
Yeah.
It's like, you need to know shit that nobody else knows.
Your career started in the UK. What has really helped you differentiate yourself and rise up in the corporate ranks in the United States?
It's interesting because I see there's a lot of people here from the UK, and particularly in strategy, because a lot of the original strategy business was formed in the UK. So people used to joke in the industry, do you need to have an accent to have this job? Yeah. Have a strategy guy. And they'll say, oh, it's because of the accent. Do you know what I mean? I've heard people say that to me.
Do people assume you're smarter because you have a British accent?
Do you know what they say? Because like being British, having a British accent maybe gives you 20 more IQ points. And that's it. But being black takes away 30. So it's perception-wise. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? So I lost in the game. So, but seriously, I think for me, the advantage of America versus the UK is that this is just a bigger sandbox. You know what I mean? There's just so much more out here you can do. The UK is centralized in London. It's a smaller market. One person comes in, one has to go out. This is growing at a faster pace. So the opportunities and the scale is bigger. So I would say part of it is that I think I chose the right businesses, the right areas to focus on. I made the right bets. around the knowledge.
Data science.
Exactly. I'm always thinking about what's the next big thing.
It sounds like that came from a big thirst and curiosity to read about your market.
Also knowing I ain't got a safety net. So I know I just gotta keep hustling just to keep ahead, and I gotta work a little bit harder than everybody else. And so, yeah, I'm always reading. I'm always thinking about what's next. I'm always, every time we meet, we're always chatting about where's the world going and that kind of stuff. So I have that mindset, and it's a kind of a struggle mindset,
I was in Mumbai, India last year, and an Indian asked me bluntly, he said, "Are Americans lazy?" I guess that was the perception from his perspective in Mumbai. I don't know how far and deep that goes, but the perception compared to the United States. When you come here from London, did you perceive a lot of us in America being complacent?
Not compared to London. I think London's way more relaxed.
Not necessarily
compared to Nigeria. Oh yeah,
Nigeria.
Nigerians are like, what are those guys doing over there, man? Put me on a plane. So no, I mean, if you compare to London, I think the work-life balance is more balanced.
Yeah, I misspoke there.
Yeah, but if you go to there's a quote, if if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere, but you can't make it in Lagos. If you make it in New York, that doesn't mean you're gonna make it in Lagos. I can tell you that right now. You know what I mean? Because that just means you can land. Yeah. Because you got hustled 100 times harder. Over there before you could be successful. You know what I mean?
So it's more of that Nigerianness.
That I think that's more at the core of it for me. It's just kind of like, and also just knowing that I need to make it work, and also I ain't got the support network. I ain't got any of the resources that other people have got. No, I just got to do it, man. I got to do it. And so I think, it's like, there's a Frederick Douglass quote I like, which is like, without struggle, there's no progress. Do you know what I mean? It is all about the struggle. But it's not just about the struggle. Sorry, let me take that back. It's also about the story. What story are you telling yourself in your head about who you are? You know what I mean? And about what you're about. And so I brand myself. I talk to myself in the sense that I'm like, okay, I am my angle is about I'm going to discover new ideas and push into the hardest spaces. Because not everyone wants to go into those spaces, and that's where I'm going to specialize in. So when everyone was struggling with around the idea of data and digital coming together, and people didn't really know the answer to that, I dove into that. When everyone's thinking about multi-screen and how you manage all of that, I dove into that, which is what led me to NBC Universal. I'm now thinking of other things, beyond that. I'm thinking about AR and VR. I'm thinking about entertainment and content and how they all synchronize together. So I want to do those things that are harder because fewer people can do those things. And that's the story I tell myself, and I'm willing to put the time and effort into making it happen.
I want to thank Tony for coming on the show.
Oh, anytime, man.
Where can people check you out online?
You can find me on Twitter. That's the place. I always respond. Effik at Twitter, basically. AEFFIK. That's my handle.
All right, thanks for coming on the show.
Anytime.
Let's go. Thanks, everybody, for listening to Go. You can check me out at Jamarlin Martin on Twitter, and also come check us out at Moguldom.com. That's MOGULDOM.com. Be sure to subscribe to our daily newsletter. You can get the latest information on crypto, tech, economic empowerment, and politics. Let's go.